A Patrick Sycamore story, Cruden Bay, More Than Meets the Eye, by Dakota-Storm, Boggan, Thompson. Part 1. It had been 7 weeks since my trip to Whittenby, and in that time I had had no calls for my services. I was just making myself a cup of Earl Grey tea when my phone rang. I picked up the receiver and said, "Hello? Who is this?" "Is this Patrick Sycamore?" inquired a thick Scottish voice. "It is," I replied. "How can I be of assistance?" "We need your help," replied the voice. "We need you to come to Cruden Bay." "What's going on there?" I asked. "Terrible things. People are changing into unspeakable creatures. There's a sickness affecting everyone except my family." "When did this begin?" 2 weeks ago, when a visitor came here. Tall man, didn't talk much." "How was he dressed?" "He wore a black suit, a black hat, and had shiny shoes." "I fear that you are in the grip of a terrible evil," I said. "Tell me how to get there, and I'll be with you in as short a time as possible." After I'd received instructions on how to reach Cruden Bay and organised a place for me to stay, I began to pack. There was only one person that I could think of that fitted the description that the Scotsman had given me. Vincent Straw. What was he doing in Scotland? I had had a feeling that we would meet at some point. I had only ever seen Straw 3 times. Twice in Liverpool when I had fought Granny Rambles, an evil witch who had tried to become the Queen of Hell, and the 3rd time was in Whittenby when I had been leaving the town. I'd spotted him out of the corner of my eye, but had been unable to get a better look at him. It would take me about 10 hours in total to reach Cruden Bay. In that time, I would be able to think about what I would have to do. I packed my suitcase with a week's worth of clothes and put it in the boot of my Hillman Hunter GLS. I also took with me a case of holy water, a box of crucifixes from various parts of the world, and a box of Catholic holy Bibles. I also took with me the Codex, a vessel of knowledge that had provided me with many solutions to terrible problems. I put Max, my Rottweiler, in the back seat, where he sat looking out of the window. When I had finished loading the car, I started the engine and began to drive my way to Cruden Bay. It was 11 a.m. when I set out, and I expected to arrive at about 9 p.m. As I drove, I put the radio on and listened to the news. After 5 hours, Max and I got out of the car to stretch our legs and eat a meal of sandwiches that I had packed for the journey. While Max ate his way through several sausages that I'd brought for him, I wondered at what Vincent Straw could possibly be. Was he a demon escaped from the restraints of the inferno pit of hell? I'd seen him fight Granny Ramble's demons, and he'd been able to destroy them by the simple raising of one hand. Could he be the devil himself? There were things far more terrifying than hell. I'd studied them all, and seen several, such as the Pre-Infernum. Was Vincent Straw an agent of the Pre-Infernum? Or was he something more, something older, something from a time before man, before the creation of this universe, a leftover from a previous one perhaps? I would have to ask him. We set off in the car once again, only stopping to fill up the fuel tank. When we reached Cruden Bay, it was not what I was expecting. The streets were filled with feces and urine. The walls of buildings were smeared with blood. Along the streets crept small cat-like creatures with no skin. On the walls of houses were limpet-like creatures with small tentacle-like things protruding from them. The sky was filled with dark clouds that spat lightning. As I drove through the streets, I saw larger creatures dragging themselves along the ground. Some were part human and had a second torso that was demonic and limp. I had never seen things quite like this. I drove to the house where my Scottish host had told me to go to. I pulled up outside a house covered in beetles that had praying mantis-like claws on their back. I got out of the car, a crucifix in one hand. I opened the back door and let Max out. The front door of the house opened and two bearded men rushed towards me. "Are you Patrick Sycamore?" queried one of the bearded men. "I am," I said. "My equipment is in the back of the car. If you will kindly assist me in taking them into the house, then I can start to find out what the problem here is." The two Scotsmen carried my heavy boxes and cases into the house, and after locking my car door, I followed them. The inside of the house was dark, and the yellow light from the bulbs didn't quite manage to reach the corners of the rooms. The windows were boarded up on the inside with sheets of metal. My Scottish acquaintances led me to the living room, where I found two women sitting together on a settee, who petted Max as soon as he came into the room. "What are your names?" I asked, sitting myself down in a green armchair. "My name is John Stewart. I'm the one that called you," said the oldest man. "This is my brother, Clyde. The woman sitting on the left half of the settee is my wife Christine, and the woman on the right half is Fiona." "Tell me as much as you can about how this began," I said, getting up and opening the lead box that held the codex. "I should be able to work out what is going on." "It all began when the tall man came into the village, like I said on the phone," said John. "After that, the air became cold, and we had terrible downpours of rain. After a while, the youngsters began to do strange things that they wouldn't normally do, like urinate in the street, laugh spontaneously, stab people with kitchen knives. None of us could work out what was going on. The local constabulary had seemingly disappeared. My brother and Fiona had come here for the holiday to celebrate their 4th anniversary. I told them about what was going on in the village, but before we could leave, the streets filled with monsters and excreta. Luckily I had kept the metal window panels from when we had bought the house, and Clyde and I drilled them back into place. The creatures outside keep trying to get in, but they haven't yet." "What about those bug things outside on the walls? Have none of those crept in?" I asked. "They haven't," replied John. "I think that they're just here to mark the house." "Are you all Catholic?" I asked. "We are," John said. "Good," I said. "While I'm here, you will have to do everything that I say, no matter how strange and disturbing it might be. Is that understood?" "It is," said John. "Good. I need you to be quiet while I read." The living room became silent. Anticipation filled the air. I knew deep down what was causing the terrible things to happen in this village, but I had to be sure. When I reached the chapter on the subject and read through it, my fears were confirmed. "What we're dealing with," I began, setting the codex down on the chairside table, "is a power that is older than this universe." "What do you mean?" asked Clyde. "Before this universe was, there was another, and before that one, there was another, and so forth. Each of these universes had their own angels and demons, heroes and monsters, heavens and hells. When each universe reached its end, it was recreated by God, and a new universe was created. With the destruction of the previous universe was, of course, debris. This debris can be found even on this earth, particular stones and other things. If inanimate matter such as a stone can survive the destruction of one universe, what's to say that it won't succeed in surviving the destruction of all of them? But what if creatures from one of these universes had also succeeded in surviving? What if the hells of these dead universes had somehow managed to succeed in clinging to existence? Within the pages of that book, the Codex, is the information formulated over 4,000 years. I've read it through many times. The power at work here is a terrible one. The Codex knows not its age, except that it is claimed to be older than this universe. That power is the tall man who you saw come to your town. His name is Vincent Straw. At least, that is the name that he gives out. Imagination cannot help you understand how old he is. Only he knows. In his universe, he may have been but a low-level demon, perhaps just a simple demoniac slave that was too weak to climb the ladder of promotion. He could be far worse than any demonic entity that this universe holds. He has done this before, but was stopped by a deal with a priest in ancient days. I'll tell you more about that in a short while. "What do we do?" asked John. "There are a few options," I said. "We could find Vincent's base of operations and destroy it, trapping him within it. It's just a matter of finding it. We might be able to help you there," said Clyde. "When the tall man, Vincent, came through, he made his way straight to New Slane's castle. It's about 1.5 miles away. 5 minutes in the car." "That is where I must go then," I said. "I will drive most of the way and study the building and see what the situation is. Then I can come up with a plan of action." "Do you want any of us to come with you?" asked Christine. "No thank you," I replied. "It would be best if I went alone. I will leave Max here to guard you." "Good luck to you," said John, escorting me to the door after telling me which road to go down. "I will pray for your safe return." "Thank you," I said, stepping outside. "I shan't be long." With that, I went to my car, unlocked it and got in. I started the engine and drove off towards New Slane's castle. Part 2. As I drove, I watched creatures lumbering around people's gardens. Some seemed to be trying to do ordinary things, like smelling a flower or mowing the lawn. Although the creatures in the gardens were hideous, I felt a slight sympathy for them. It came into my mind that maybe the creatures around me were in fact human. Perhaps they had been distorted to look like people from another universe, another time. I decided that it would be wise of me to investigate this theory while I was on my way back to John's house. After driving down Castle Road, I came to a dirt track that was ungated. I drove to the fork at the end of the road and turned my car around so that I could easily leave the area after investigating the castle. I locked my car and walked along the right lane of the fork until I came to a bush that was shorter than the rest of its comrades, lining what appeared to be a field. I jumped over this small bush and looked at Slane's castle. Its walls were black and had thousands of tiny, limpet-like creatures living on them. I saw hideously deformed monsters wandering around its walls. These were the castle's guards. From long flagpoles hung gently waving blood-red flags with the image of a circle in their centers. I decided to return to my car, but was stopped when an invisible hand grabbed my shoulder and pushed me to the ground. I jumped up and snatched a crucifix from my coat pocket. "Begone, foul demon! Return and fester in the infernal pit from which you came." No other attempts at stopping me were made by my invisible opponent, and I returned to my car unharmed. As I was driving back to John's house, I stopped at another, whose garden contained a creature with sharp teeth, black skin, and a shaved rat's body. I opened my window and waved at the creature with a smile that concealed my disgust. The rat monster looked up at me and waved back. I carried on back to John's house, where I found him waiting outside with a baseball bat, waiting to repel invaders. I got out of the car and locked it before walking up to John. "I hope nothing hurt you," said the Scotsman. "Nothing at all," I returned, but the spirit did push me over. We went into the house and sat down in the living room. A tense silence filled the air while I sat compiling my thoughts into an explanation. "The castle is guarded by monsters and invisible spirits," I began. "There may also be other dangers that I did not see. Only one person can get into the castle. Any more than that, and I fear that we'd be spotted." "So what do we do?" asked John. "I must get into the castle and find the master of the chaos that surrounds us." "What happens if the monsters outside try to get in while you're at the castle?" asked Fiona. "The monsters that you've seen are perfectly harmless," I said. "They are human." "You're joking," said Clyde. "On the contrary," I replied. "I waved at one, and it waved back before it went back to trying to prune a hedge. These monsters around us are your friendly village neighbours. The monsters that you've heard at the door are probably people like the postman and Jehovah's Witnesses. They are harmless." "You told us earlier that a priest in ancient times made a deal with the man responsible for all this in order to stop him," said John. "What was the deal?" "I'm glad you asked that," I said. "The deal was that Vincent Straw could afflict a minority of people around the world with a certain disorder for his entertainment, so long as he didn't bring about the apocalypse. The priest also committed suicide to give Vincent his soul. I believe that Vincent has grown bored of torturing people with this disorder because there are now medicines to stop it." "What's the disorder?" asked John. "Schizophrenia," I replied. "I assume that none of you have this condition?" "No," said John, "we don't." I looked around the room for a moment before saying, "Where's Christine?" "She was tired when you left the house, so she went to lay down on our bed," said John. "We'd better go up and get her then," I said. "It's not wise for any of you to be alone." All of a sudden, a high-pitched scream resonated around the house. "Christine!" said John, leaping out of his chair. We all rushed up the stairs and ran to John's bedroom. "I can't open the door," said John, trying to turn the door handle. "Move out of the way," I said. John moved out of my way, and I gave the door an almighty bang with my shoulder and broke the lock. When we got into the room, a spectacle of horror met us. The monster was made up of a wriggling mass of tentacles and insect-like legs. "Kill it!" screamed Fiona. "No," I said, stopping Clyde from moving forward to kill the beast. "That's Christine. She's changed." We backed out of the room and closed the door. Christine wouldn't be able to open the door because she had no hands to do so. While my hosts went into the living room, I travelled to their kitchen and boiled the gas kettle. I entered the living room some 5 minutes later, with a tray of cups full of Earl Grey tea and a packet of custard creams. "Now then," I said, "we now know that if one of you is alone, then you are likely to change into a monstrous creature. I believe that I will not be affected, because I am not from around here." "What are you going to do then?" asked Clyde. "I am going to infiltrate Slane's castle and eliminate the threat that is changing everyone in this village into monsters." "Do you know how to stop it?" asked John. "Not yet," I said, "but once inside, I'll be able to find out." "It sounds dangerous to me," said John. "It is," I replied, "but it must be done." I got up and repacked the codex. "When are you going?" asked Fiona. "Now," I replied. "You mustn't interfere with the plan," she said. I turned round to a spectacle of terror. Fiona had changed into a hideous caricature of herself. Her fingers had become twisted, and she had stretched to a horrible height. John and Clyde were standing silently in obvious horror.
"Now,"
said the monster,
"you die."
I pulled out a crucifix from my pocket and began to recite. "Begone, demon, or be vanquished by the angels of heaven."
"Your religion has no power over me,"
snarled the monster. I pulled John and Clyde away from the living room and shoved them into the hallway with Max, who had dozed off near the kitchen door. When I returned, I closed the living room door. "If my religion has no power over you," I said ominously, then I'm going to have to do this the old-fashioned way.
What do you mean?
Inquired the creature that loomed before me. I pulled out a sacred knife from its sheath, which was attached to my belt. The knife had been given to me many years ago by an old priest, and had been the only thing that had stopped the demon Baal and his legions from taking over the world some 3,000 years ago. I had kept it in a leather sheath hanging from a hook in my study for many years, and had felt that it would have to be used on my trip to Scotland. "It means that I have to kill you with my bare hands," I said, staring into my opponent's eyes. The monstrosity lunged towards me and tried to grab me with its long, spidery fingers. I slashed its hand and punched it hard in the ribs. The monster yelped and launched itself towards me. The monster and I crashed through the plaster wall and fell in a heap in front of John and Clyde. I hit it hard in the face and pushed it off of me. I picked up a large piece of plaster as the creature that had once been human begged me for mercy, and dropped it onto its face, knocking it out cold. I turned towards John and Clyde, who were standing in awe and shock. "You might want to drag it outside," I said, before stepping through the wall back into the living room and collecting my codex. I helped John and Clyde drag the monster outside before I got in my car, and decided to leave Max with them, as they would need his protection more than I would. "What happened to Fiona?" John asked me through my open window. "Will she go back to normal after all this?" She evidently had a demon seed inside of her that slowly asserted itself so that it could blend in with normal people. "The demon will heal itself quickly, and when this is all over she will return to normal." "Thank you for helping us," said John. "I'll see you soon, I hope," I said. "Keep the kettle on and get a cup of Earl Grey tea ready for my return." "Will do," said John, shaking my hand. I drove off towards Slane's castle and the inevitable fight that would decide the fate of humanity. I had considered contacting my friends who had helped me in Whittenby, but decided that it would take them too long to get to Cruden Bay. It was up to me to destroy the evil that had survived an unknowable amount of universes. I would succeed. Part 3. When I got to the open gates of Slane's castle, I parked my car behind some bushes and got out of it. I collected the codex from the passenger seat and put 2 bottles of holy water into my overcoat pockets. I also took an exorcist's crucifix that had been used to rid many demons from the possessed. I walked towards the open gates and felt something invisible brush past me. I walked through the gates and stopped dead in my tracks as a familiar voice spoke to me. "So, the great Patrick Sycamore has come to stop me." "I have, Vincent, and I will succeed." "We will see," said Vincent. I felt the ground tremble, and about 100 feet away, a huge explosion of soil and stones filled the air. From the ground had come a monster some 15 feet tall that was comprised of stone, soil, and flesh. The monster cried out in anger when it saw me and began to run in my direction. I waited until it was within touching distance when I slid between its legs and ran behind it towards the castle's main entrance. I ran through the entrance at high speed and got behind a marble pillar that held the roof up. I looked around the huge room which I had entered and was shocked at what I saw. Flowing around the room were women of varying heights with red hair and grey cloaks round their shoulders. Banshees. I walked in their direction with confident steps and stopped just short of one of them. The red-haired beauty came towards me with an air of grace and touched my arm. The Banshee pulled her hand back quickly as I pulled out my crucifix. "Be warned," I said. "I'll kill anything that gets in my way." All of the banshees had stopped moving around at this point, and were slowly coming towards me. "You need not do this," I said. The air was suddenly filled with a terrifying screech from the throats of the banshees that caused me to wince. The banshees wandered off in different directions, shrieking every now and then. I walked to the next room and came across an entirely different type of demon. A suited man stood in the center of the square room with his head down. "State your name," I said.
Impaler,
said the figure. "Charming," I said. "Are you here to stop me?"
I am.
"Then perform your function." The demon came towards me and attempted to impale me with 2 huge iron spikes that were his hands. I pulled out my ancient knife and set down the codex. As we fought, I recited an ancient paragraph from the codex. "May I find the strength to destroy my foe, and may my foe learn to fear God. May the angels of heaven look down upon my enemies and destroy them with their spears of purity." My knife soon managed to pass through Impaler's web of attack, and I gutted his demonic body with all the grace of a butcher. "I congratulate you, Sycamore," said Vincent's voice from somewhere in the darkness. "You are quite entertaining." I picked up the codex and carried on into the next room. The next room was filled with mists, and I saw a blade narrowly miss my chest. My attacker soon revealed himself to be a swordsman dressed in Arabian clothing and a mask of rags. The creature threw me one of its swords and waited for me to pick it up. I picked up the sword and waited for my opponent's move. The swordsman came towards me with a whirl and moved around me like water. I held my own and soon began to make small cuts on the arms of my attacker. My attacker had failed to injure me and seemed a little confused. "This has gone far enough," I said. I threw the sword to the floor, stunning my attacker. "Go, evil spirit, for I know your name, and it is Saphan. Return to your Arabian lands and do not return, or you shall feel the wrath of God." The figure crossed his arms and bowed, before slowly fading from existence. "This is becoming annoying," I muttered. "You will not be able to kill me," said Vincent's voice. "Nobody has ever succeeded in even touching me." I ran through the different rooms and began to recite. "Let nothing stop me from reaching my goal. Clear my sight, mighty one, and let me see clearly. Let no magic trick my eyes into believing something that is not truly there." In the blink of an eye, everything that appeared dark was illuminated and revealed the castle to be the true ruin that it was. I walked down one of the hallways and came to a tall archway. As I stepped through the archway, a dark shadow fell over me. A huge, winged demon, far bigger than any I'd seen before, descended from the walls and grabbed me by the shoulders in order to carry me away. I slashed the demon's hand and heard it scream.
"You will not see the master!"
The demon bellowed. "I think I will." The demon came towards me and grabbed my right arm before I could raise my knife. I swung the lead-lined case that contained the codex and heard the demon's skull crack as it hit its head. The demon span around for a few moments before it focused its eyes back on me. I watched it stumble towards me before it crumpled to the floor. "Well done," said Vincent's voice. "You are very skilled. But no matter, I will summon more of this world's creatures to wear you down." "Too scared to finish me yourself?" I said. "No," said Vincent's disembodied voice. "I am simply amusing myself." "You're not the only person who can summon creatures," I said. I set the codex's case on the floor, and I stepped onto it. "Black Shuck, ancient one who lurks in the shadows, I summon thee. Help me in defeating my enemy, and you will be rewarded with his head, as well as his minions to feed on. I call you from your dwelling place, you who have struck fear into men since they first existed. Come to me, Black Shuck." A strong wind blew around me, and I felt the air grow cold. Lightning struck the ground. An immense shadow fell over me, and I heard a deep, rumbling growl behind me. I turned around to face the huge canine. Black Shuck stood a head taller than myself on all of his legs and stared down at me. I raised my arm to touch the immense dog's head and stroked his fur. "Sit," I commanded. "I have not finished summoning allies." Black Shuck sat down obediently and waited silently. I summoned Tommy Rawhead. "Come to me. Come out of Knocker's Hole and come to me. You shall be rewarded well." I also summon the Beast of Dean. "Come now from your pit of bones and help me. You will be rewarded well." I summon Old Martin. I need his brutal strength. I summon the Cock Lane Ghost to bring justice to my enemy. "Come now and obey." The sky suddenly became black and the air even more intensely cold. A dreadful, crouching creature whose face was covered in blood materialized beside me. "Hello, Tommy," I said. A loud snuffling informed me that the Beast of Dean, a warthog capable of felling trees, had arrived. A deep, resonating grunt told me that Old Martin the grizzly bear had arrived. A large, invisible hand touched my shoulder, confirming the presence of the Cock Lane Ghost. I stepped down from the Codex's case and picked it up. "Follow me," I said. Part 4. We strode through the corridors of Slane's castle, killing any creature that attempted to bar our way. Old Martin's main tactic was to disembowel his enemy with his teeth before crushing their head with one of his huge paws. The Beast of Dean's approach was far more brutal, consisting of spearing his victim with one of his tusks before shaking them vigorously to death. Black Shuck didn't attack any of the demons, and instead walked beside me as my bodyguard. Tommy Rawhead tore any body in front of him apart, tearing out their organs with a cruel smile. The Cock Lane Ghost's hand had stayed firmly affixed to my shoulder as we had walked through the ruined castle. We reached the centre of the castle some 20 minutes later. The centre of the castle was a huge round tower room that held no life except for a tall figure standing in its centre. "Hello, Vincent," I said. "Hello, Patrick," said Straw. "I see you arrived without difficulty." I turned towards my allies and spoke. "You may go now. I free you from your summons. Go now and feast on the remains of my enemies. They are your rewards." Old Martin, the Beast of Dean, and Tommy Rawhead turned and ran towards their trail of destruction to eat their victims' remains. Black Shuck stayed with me, as did the Cock Lane Ghost. "I'll deal with Vincent," I said. I strode towards the tall man and stared at him. "Why are you doing all of this?" I asked. "You know why," said Straw. "I want to hear you say it," I said. "Very well," said Vincent. "I am from a universe where I held dominion over the evil elements. I was what you would call the devil, but far worse. My universe ended and killed everything except me. I watched a new universe born, and I asserted my will over that one as well, and the same thing happened again. Since then, I have studied several universes' evils, methods. Some were pathetic, some were truly terrible to see. I am now trying to replace this universe. I want my one back, you see, and the only way that I can do that is by changing everything into what I want it to be. What you would call hell, but on a different scale. I see, I said. If I can survive the birth and death of a universe, what do you think you can do? I can make a deal, I said. Like the one with the priest? Inquired Vincent. Yes, I replied. Are you interested? Always, said Vincent. You can strike the world with a condition that affects 1 million people out of its 8 billion and watch the pain of their families and friends. What kind of condition? Asked Vincent. A condition which causes instant brain death. Interesting, Straw said. The condition will make people have to care for its victim and bring great pain to them. Is it a deal? It is, Vincent said, putting out his right hand to shake mine. No going back, I said. Oh, I wouldn't dream of it, said Straw with a grin. I set down the codex and sheathed my knife. I grasped Vincent's hand and squeezed it firmly. I tapped my foot on the floor. Black Shuck leaped through the air and dragged Vincent's Straw to the floor. What trickery is this? Demanded Vincent. We didn't shake, I said, which means that our deal is void. What is your plan? I'll tell you, I said. You are not older than this universe. You are a demon, and all demons are subject to the same rules. Give me your name. How did you see through my ruse? Asked Vincent. Simple, I said. Nothing can physically survive the creation of a new universe. Mentally, perhaps, but not physically. Eventually, though, a mind will degrade over time, especially a demon's. This leads me to believe that you are something different, but you are of this universe. Well done, said Vincent. You are correct. I am not older than this universe, but you are wrong about physical objects being unable to survive the ending of a universe. Explain, I said. A stone survived, said Vincent. A stone which held the power of a demon. Perhaps it was the brain of some sort of monster, I do not know, but I tapped into it and absorbed its power, making me immortal and granting me abilities that no other demon possesses. I have used the knowledge of another universe, and I want to see its outcome. How old are you? I asked. 5,047 years old. Reverse what you have done, I said, or I'll kill you here and now. I am immortal, stated Straw. You cannot kill me. Really? I said. I grabbed Vincent's Straw by the throat and squeezed it hard. You don't seem to realize who I am, I said. I have killed demons and satanic spirits for years, fought monsters big and small, all of which claimed they were immortal. But you know where they are now? They're all dead. Your power certainly is strong, but never strong enough to stop me. Why don't I put that to the test? Said Vincent. The walls of the castle began to crumble, and the ground began to shake. Black Shuck, get out of here, I said. I'm staying to finish this. The huge dog walked a few paces, turned to look at me, and then carried on through a doorway. The Cocklane Ghost's hand was still on my shoulder, but I didn't believe that he could be hurt. Now you will see my power, said Vincent. Lightning struck the ground around me. I opened the Codex's case and lifted out the ancient book. Fire had surrounded us, hot wind blew in my face, and the stench of death had reached up my nostrils. Bear witness, said Vincent. A torrent of flame erupted from Vincent's palms and enveloped me. There was flame all around me. The Codex's case had melted next to me, but I had not been hurt. The Codex, I guessed, had saved me due to its protective abilities. "Goodbye, Patrick Sycamore," said Vincent through the flames. I unsheathed my knife and aimed it for the area that I had heard my enemy's voice coming from. My knife throw resulted in a loud yell and curse. I emerged through the flames without feeling its heat and stood before Vincent. "You can't have survived," exclaimed Vincent. "I did though," I said. I grabbed Vincent by the throat and head-butted him. Vincent fell to the floor with a moan. I dragged his limp body through the flames and hallways and rooms until we were outside. "Reverse what you have done," I said, "or I'll kill you and you'll never see the result of whatever your grand scheme is." "Very well," said Vincent, "but I have one condition." "Name it," I said. "You must let me go," grinned Vincent. "If that is the price, then you may have your freedom," I said. "But you must guarantee that you will reverse everything here. Everything." "Of course," said Vincent. I let go of Vincent's throat and let him stand. Vincent raised one of his hands and clicked his fingers. "Done," he said. "Good," I said. "You'd better leave, just on the off chance that I decide to kill you now." "We'll meet again," said Vincent. "You'll see." "Go," I said. "Now." Vincent turned his back and began to walk away from me on the green grass that surrounded Slane's castle. I went back to my car, where I found Black Shuck standing, waiting for me. "You may go," I said. "I am afraid that I cannot reward you for coming to my summons." I felt a squeeze on my shoulder, and I realized the Cock Lane ghost was still with me. "I tell a lie," I said, raising my hand towards Black Shuck's nose. "Here is your reward. A hunt. The scent of Vincent Straw." The huge black dog sniffed my hand, licked it once, and ran off in the direction of Vincent Straw. The Cock Lane ghost's hand let go of my shoulder, and I got into my car. Part 5. I knocked on John Stewart's door, and when he opened it, he was overjoyed. "You stopped him. Christine and Fiona are back to normal." "So are your neighbours," I said. "Nobody seems to be bothered about what happened. I think they don't remember." "Good," said John. "Do you think I could have that cup of Earl Grey tea?" I asked. "Come this way," said John. I spent the rest of that day with John and his family before moving my things to an inn where we ate together, and I explained what I had had to do. I spent the night at the inn, and the next day left after picking up Max from John's house because the inn didn't allow pets. As I drove through the quiet streets of Cruden Bay, I thought back to the previous day, when it had been a horrifying village of terrifying monsters. I was driving down the road out of the village when I stopped my car abruptly. Out of the corner of my eye, I'd seen something. A figure, dressed in black, with a matching fedora. When I turned to look, though, there was nobody but an old man and woman walking down the street. Vincent Straw had been right. We would meet again. I did not know when, but I had a feeling that I'd have some research to do, and hoped that I would have enough time to do it in. I would have to plan long and hard for the return of Vincent Straw, but only time could tell when that would be.